Hello and welcome to Two Blokes in a Cave, a podcast hosted by me, Carlton Sin, a Smells and Bells Catholic and part-time English poetry enjoyer. And I'm joined by my good friend Cameron Wright, the resident swimming champion and future convert to Catholicism. Cameron, how you going?
Yeah, good, mate. 100%. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Thanks for joining me. It's always good to have you on board. Today, pretty interesting conversation. I thought we'd go to a very broad question. Like, what is philosophy? I suppose, like, our entire premise for the podcast is around the cave, obviously the allegory of the cave, and that's Plato, maybe the most famous philosopher, but certainly one of the pivotal players in philosophical history. But like, what is it? And why is it important to engage in philosophical discussion, or is it important to engage in it?
Well, I would consider it is, and I hope both of us would, because we're doing this and talk about it.
I certainly do, yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of stuff. When you do it first, it's the pure definition is like the love of wisdom, I think, when it breaks down, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I've definitely seen a quote from Plato that says philosophy begins with wonder.
Yeah, that's right.
And I know you don't have any kids at the moment, but one of the coolest things about having children is watching them be amazed at the world around them. So watching, like, I walk with my son and he'll stop at spider webs and look at the spider and point at it and just be really excited that there is life and there's, you know, a creative element to things that he's seen for the first time. And that kind of intrigue and natural, like, interest in the world around him, I think is actually it'd be fair to say that is what, if you have that kind of curiosity as an adult, that would be the beginning of a love or longing for philosophy.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It definitely is hitting on something that I think is correct.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I'm just imagining nowadays, you know, you lose a bit of that when you grow up. The kid's looking at the spider web and then you're coming and going, ah! But,
I mean, again, everyone's different. You try to encourage curiosity. I think at its core
curiosity
is like one of the defining human characteristics is to be curious. And I certainly don't want to think in the future I had anything to do with tamping down my son's natural inclination towards curiosity. Because I do know people, and you would know people that are just not interested in knowing why.
Yeah, that's
like
right.
if you say, hey, the answer is 6, they just have no interest in like why it's 6.
Yeah.
But I'm actually much more interested in the why than I am maybe the end.
Yeah.
And I know you pretty well, so I'm kind of cheating, but I suspect you're quite similar, which is why we enjoy the philosophical discussion is I do want to know why.
Yeah.
It's not enough, like, you know, when you're a kid or you're in school and you get told, I want you to do this. And you're like, why? That kind of pivotal, seminal, like foundational question, like, why should I do that?
Yeah.
And I think it's so important, even though it can be annoying with small people, but to explain why.
Yeah.
Because it's such a natural longing. And to your point, it is tamped down by not just your, I'd say, authority figures broadly, you know, your parents, teachers, coaches, but like society generally is, don't worry about why, just get back to producing. Everything's about production. Yeah. You are a widget in this giant machine that we call complex society, which is why we need all these regulatory bodies. I mean, there's no time for reading, and oh my goodness.
Wow. What does that mean? Oh no.
Wave your hand.
There we go. Perfect.
I can't figure out where, that's hilarious. I can't figure out where, like, that's the sensor. I can't figure out where the light is just to keep it on. Do you want to just turn those 2 switches on?
Yeah, right.
And just see if
these ones?
Yeah, just turn them on. Yeah, and then the bottom one, just hopefully that
Let's
stays on without the motion, because that's pretty funny.
Yeah.
But we're working on.
That was wondrous, though. I did enjoy that.
It's a new set. So we're working out the kinks here, but it's definitely.
Which, by the way, like full disclosure, we spent such a long time bumming around setting this up. First 5 seconds, the light goes off. We didn't think of that. Yeah.
I thought that because we'd be moving around, it would pick us up, and it would be
we're not moving enough.
But man, everything that's a good point. Like, everything that has this is an automatic light, obviously, and there's a sensor above us, and I think it's really cool because if you walk down here, you don't have to, you know, search for a light switch. You can just walk in, it'll pick you up and turn the light on. But on the flip side, it's a timed light, so it'll kind of just turn off. So it does present challenges, which is cool, I guess. I don't know. But circling back.
Yeah. Well, they used to just randomly, just really nothing to the main point, but there used to be a light in my house that would stay on for 10 minutes, regardless of if you were in the room or not. You just turn it on, it would stay on for 10 minutes, and then sort of. Also, I timed it miscellaneous 10 minutes. Someone was 9, someone was 15. It would just turn off, and you're like brushing your teeth, and it's
the fucking horror movie stuff right here. Like,
yeah, but it's terrible. That ruined all my
terrifying.
philosophical inclinations.
You're just sitting there like, and life is so safe and peaceful.
It's worse if you're on the toilet, I suppose, because then you can't move your stuff. But yeah, sort of side note. No, I think yeah, definitely. Well, philosophy used to mean everything, right? If you go back like 2,000 years, it's everything. It's like questioning.
Science,
yeah, looking. It's natural sciences. It's every form of
political science.
It was everything, I guess.
Discussions about leaves.
Yes, it's just
the origins of dolphins.
The search of knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a good way of putting it too. It's just the pursuit of information.
Yeah, and then as time goes on, those different parts of knowledge get factored down to their own
specific
discourse.
Discipline.
Yeah, in their own discipline, and then pushes philosophy back. It's pure philosophy, I guess. The questioning about stuff we don't know, all the way to the edges. And like what you're saying with the kids, a lot of scientists. I mean, I've even seen Neil deGrasse Tyson say, children are like all natural scientists.
Yeah.
And he's referring, actually, now I'm thinking about it, which you make a good
philosophy.
point. He's referring to the fact that they're all
curious,
questioning and philosophy.
Yeah.
They're doing
because what is science at its core? And I think science. I could be slightly mistaken, but I'm fairly certain that the scientific method was invented by Aristotle. Right. It was the idea of having a thesis, testing it, and then having an outcome. And obviously that's been built upon by a great number of dedicated scientists. But Aristotle, I believe, was one of the first to say, like, I think X equals Y. And he would go out and like practically say, look at this. This is how things flow. Like the river flows from top to bottom as opposed to bottom to top, for instance.
Yeah, definitely.
And then because he could see that and note it, he'd be like, that now can be kind of marked on as knowledge that I have tested, acquired, and I can pass it on with the certainty that it is correct. And while he, again, like may not know like germ theory, but might be able to say like, hey, like dead things, I think it wasn't Aristotle, but I think it was a Roman statesman that had some kind of germ theory in the Republic. He's like, they're invisible, you can't see them, but they do make you sick if you're digging around in like a rotting carcass.
Yeah, there's something there.
But there's like the innate knowledge that we would pass on from family to family. If the meat is rotten, don't eat it.
Yeah,
you might not be able to explain specifically what is going on, like the specific decomposition microbes that are making you sick, but we can't eat that. It's bad. And that's fair enough if you don't have a microscope. You can't see anything. Yeah. So you just, it's another world, a completely invisible world. You make some inferences, but then, you can have a good enough knowledge base to pass on that information to keep you and your family and your countrymen alive. Don't eat rotten meat, even if it's like there.
Yeah.
I'm really hungry.
And there's always one guy who's breaking the rule. There's old mate Johnny eating all the rotten meat. He's strong as an ox.
This is true. There's always an exception.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right with that. I think, from what I remember, I'm kind of exactly wrong. It's not exactly. I mean, he's the first of the three major philosophers who sort of was more like, stop sitting there and going super deep into your theory of the forms, and like maybe get out and like look at the external stuff and test what you're doing. I mean, there's a reason, I guess, why hypothesis is like a Greek word. I mean, there's a basis to a lot of this.
A lot of them are Greek words.
Yeah, I mean,
a lot of our origins, would you believe, Greek, like go all the way back.
Making it just like
Greek and Latin. Yeah, like this is good.
Yeah, and I guess I think the scientific method, from what I remember, was Francis Bacon, the actual sort of
coining the phrase.
Yeah, he wrote a whole thesis on it, on like the things you should and shouldn't look at.
Sense. He's pretty impressive.
Yeah, how far you can go with science and how much you can actually know versus not know. But yeah, the idea of going and actually testing stuff is definitely
Aristotelian
more than the other ones at the time. Yeah, let's do that light on and off 2.0.
I don't know. Yeah, it's crazy. We'll have to get that fixed, obviously.
There's no, if you're in the cave and there's no light, then there's no shadows in your stuff.
Well, then you can't see anything.
Just a blob in a tube.
You have nothing whatsoever. So I guess if philosophy is a pursuit of knowledge fueled by a natural curiosity, is that pursuit endemic to the human spirit, or is it a learned behavior? Like what would for instance, like obviously I'm Catholics, I think, like original sin. Everyone's marked by original sin, except maybe Mary. But everyone else is marked by original sin, right?
Yep.
Is the curiosity a feature of humanity, or is it something that we pick up by being alive?
I think it's a feature. I
Okay.
think. I mean, that's the end
Yeah.
of that. Yeah.
Well, that's it.
From what I can see, I'd say it's pretty natural. I'd say more or less it's trained out of you more than it's trained into you. I think most little kids are testing all sorts of theories. Is the stove hot? Is the sun good? Is this bug going to stab me? They're doing a lot. I mean, I don't know when it kicks in though, because a baby's just a sort of blobby nothing until they're about a certain age. They're not testing anything.
A lot of brain stuff going on there. And like growth and development. I agree like that it is endemic, and I also obviously believe that there is much more to the world, and I think a lot of those scientists like Francis Bacon, I don't want to say a lot, I don't want to speak for them, but they were certainly driven to some extent by a desire to explain the universe as they understood it under a creator God, right? Like God is a rational being that created a universe with rational rules that we can understand, and that, I guess, the umbrella of the universe is understandable pushes people to go, okay, well, we can figure out why the sun rises in the east, sets in the west. We can figure that out. And it's not like magic, as obviously many a famous quote about, science that is far advanced is indistinguishable from magic, basically. Yeah. But a more broader point on the children and the curiosity. I recall a study that my wife showed me. It's about bashing public schools, so I'm all about that. But they basically brought it in, like NASA did a study, I think 20 years ago or so.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, like a long study about like what makes a genius. Like how do you, like where is this genius coming from? And we touched on it a little bit when we talk about the cave and maybe potentially multiple caves, and then you become enlightened in certain areas of your life, and intelligence is not fixed or binary. You could be an intelligent painter or an intelligent writer, but really struggle, with directions to go to the store. Or, you could struggle with other things. Yeah. But the general idea, as I remember it, was they did this test and they marked genius on their scale that they had, and they were consistent with the same scale throughout the experiment over many, many years. And initially, like, I think it was almost 90%. It was like 80. It was a huge, overwhelming, massive majority of the kids scored extremely highly, and they all showed like genius, and they were like, this is great. How do we keep them? And when they started to track them, when they went to school, the number dropped a little bit, and as they progressed through school, the number dropped and dropped until it got to, I think, 2% at the very end, which probably is, if you look at the IQ graph, it's probably about 2% that fall in the genius IQ section,
like the Mensa type above a certain point.
So
sure.
if that holds true, unbelievable. We've got to get something. We've got to figure out how to do.
A little fan up there spinning around.
We've got to do something about the light, but we'll fix that obviously for next time. But if that's the case, and that is true, that genius is, I don't want to say it. Again, are we all naturally inclined toward genius? Because I believe that we're all malleable enough that I could teach you to be a doctor, right? You give me 7 years, put you in a room. Like if you had one-on-one tutoring for 7 years, you could be a doctor. It's not like it's beyond the realm of possibility. You may decide, I don't want to do that. I don't have the desire or the will. Philosophical term. Yeah. But you could do it, right? Like you could learn it. You're not, it's not as if there's a barrier for entry. And I guess my point is we're all born with that genius inside us, with that curiosity that fuels us. And for whatever reason, whether it is family, authority, lack of confidence, lack of whatever, we do lose it. And I guess it's interesting to know that genius is perhaps something that can be lost, like muscles at the gym. Like if you don't use your muscles, you get smaller. Brendos would never know. He's fucking huge. But like if you stop working out, your muscles slowly shrink back to, I guess, proportional to what you need them for. And so too will your intellectual capacity if you are constantly thinking about ideas, about what moves, the prime mover, so to speak, then you are probably larger of mental capacity because you're using your mind to think about things. And so much of school, if you think about it, and we're not going to get too much into like the origins of school and the Prussian history and why like schools are regimented the way they are, but so much of it is like we just need workers. That's not super controversial. I hope it's certainly fairly well documented. Like this is what a school is for. This is why school exists. But, is a school, I don't really want to get into the school thing. I talk more about like the children. Is it an evil to send your children to school knowing that there's a better than not chance that you will take them, you will dull their intellectual capacity? Because I don't believe that it's ever gone, but you might make them question less. And I wonder if that's a consideration in the modern world, given that we are so productive and production focused, that we've lost the ability to sit back and smell the roses and just enjoy life and question things and sit in a meadow with your family and talk or look at things and do things without the aid of technology. I think I read a great quote the other day. It was being bored or having limited things to do is actually really good for you. It's really good for the soul to sit and contemplate the day you've had. For us Catholics, that would be an examination of conscience, where you would sit down and essentially go through the day in your mind and go, okay, did I lose my patience? Did I lie? Did I cheat? Did I steal? Did I do things that I would regret? And again, maybe you're a pretty good person. You don't do a lot of that, but it's the beginning of contemplating, like, did I do what? Am I proud of myself today? Did I ask questions or was I too afraid to ask questions? Like, what was I doing? And that, I guess, in a very roundabout way, is what I think philosophy is all about. Yeah,
few topics there. Let me go through my thought pattern.
Absolutely.
I think it's interesting, that study. I don't know what they were actually testing for, because I read that, I thought, instantly my first instinct was like, that's correct, because I was so good when I was young and I suck now. But like, I think, look, what are they testing on genius? It must be something. It's not like pure intellectual capacity. It must be the ability to be malleable to new ideas or something. But I would think that it's
IQ type test, because I'm pretty sure.
Give a 5-year-old
I did an IQ test when I was younger.
Yeah.
And I think again, IQ test is not a capacity, as I understand it. It's not a capacity for knowledge. It's just testing the speed at which you understand a task, and it tests specifically pattern recognition. Because we spoke a bit before the cameras basically about so much of our brains are focused on pattern recognition. Is that person a threat? Is he walking happily? Like, what am I, am I trying to make sense of the world around me? I think it was IQ based, because you can do an IQ test at 5.
Are they but who are they testing against? Because surely a 20-year-old could beat a 5-year-old in
But
general.
it's not about beating as much as it is, because I think
on the graph
I'm sure there is a degree of variance between an IQ test for a child, but the premise is the same. Like, look at this box. What do you notice about it? See the next box. And I think we probably don't give kids as much credit. And I certainly look at my son, who's not yet 2. And I mean, probably about a year ago, before he's 1, you could tell him, like, hey mate, can you close the door? I never sat down specifically and said, this is a door.
Yeah.
But he could close the door. And he's a pretty super child. Obviously, I'm very biased, but he's a great kid, and he's
my gosh,
and he's doing really well. But there is a capacity for comprehension that kind of exceeds what you think. You look at kids like, he's just a kid, but they do know quite a bit. And the gap between sort of, this is interesting, sort of 2.5, 3 to like 6. There's not a lot of growth physically that happens. Like, obviously they do grow and they're not stagnant, but most of the development, most of the energy goes to like the cognitive development and functions. And obviously, very quickly, like, generally take a boy at 2 years old, double his height. That's him as an adult. Max.
Oh, is that
height.
right? Okay.
More, it's pretty
2 years.
close.
Oh, it's like time
2
a
years.
certain amount. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, my brother and I did it, and we're a centimeter or so off, like what that ratio would be. So, there's say 15, 16 years of growing, most of that is not physical. Most of that is your intellectual faculties, your passions, your capacity for reason, things like that. So early on, probably at 5, you probably have a fairly refined's probably the wrong word, but you have a fairly developed sense of like, I can notice patterns. Like I have, like 5-year-olds are not going to be able to tell you long division or the history of the United States, but they can certainly tell you like, do leaves fall. They notice things, they notice patterns, and they can pick up, if you're lying. Kids are very intuitive that way. So yeah, I'm not sure if I discount the IQ thing, but I think the IQ was the general metric that they used because there is a correlation. Obviously, it's not everything, but there is a correlation between higher IQ and genius. Because again, if you're able to pick things up quickly, you probably have a better chance of being considered a genius, right?
Yeah, and the time you have for sure.
Sure. Okay, what else? Sorry, I just keep jumping in. Like, let me just tell you.
Yeah, I think, I guess the mind's like an association machine. And I definitely think as you're like learning as a kid, the kids can pick up stuff amazingly quickly, and they can figure out meaning in miscellaneous tasks and figure it like very, very fast. Like you said with the door thing. I mean, you don't really know deep down what the kid's thinking, but he knows that those words paired together in that specific sentence means I got to go and get this door because I've seen someone do it, and I can figure out he's talking about that wooden thing combined with this thing, and it's like an association with the meaning. The meaning is, I guess, the use of what you're doing.
It's just very cool because a lot of it's implied. It has to be implied.
Well, it's just the use, I think, of what you're doing. You do it, and they.
And he looks at you and goes, But no one. To my point, like no one told my son this is a door. Like if you asked him to describe, obviously he can't talk at one, but like if you asked him to describe clothes or like tell me what clothes means, he wouldn't be able to tell you. But he has the capacity to go, I'm pretty sure, like I can intuit this is what they want me to do.
Yeah, well you couldn't tell him because he doesn't, at the beginning he doesn't know what any of the words are at all.
But like we got him to put clothes in the washing basket, which my wife thought was great because I don't do that. So like she thought that was really impressive.
Now the clothes are in the washing basket at all times. Now, I mean, you're going down a path there. Interestingly, there's like a whole philosophy of language too, where there was a big debate throughout time where people used to think the words were demarcating of exactly the objects. Like when I said the word glass, you in your mind picture a glass, and then you associate. That's what I'm talking about. Oh, there's the glass. Like, let's go. But I think there's a few different philosophers who completely say that's fully incorrect. That's not how it works at all. You actually just, the words and the sounds and the way they're put together there's no logical structure there at all. It's like the use. It's just use, and like meanings derived from how it's used in a context. And that's actually like, people go into it, that's kind of profound in a certain way, but it's like very complicated. I remember trying to do this last week for one of the podcasts. It's like, couldn't even remember the real ins and outs of why that's the case, but it's like a big deal that someone was saying that, because people used to think it was, the words represented a thing, whereas I think the words are the use that you use them. It's not representing anything, because words change over time and meanings change, and the way you use the words change the meanings of the words themselves. It's very like in a flux as opposed to like logical. Because I think it was like a Bertrand Russell tried to actually get a logic out of the structure of language, and I think gave up on it because he was like, "There's no logic to this. Doesn't make any sense."
It's fascinating. I don't want to get too far off because we have a serious run sheet. But I do want to ask one question. I think it would be a good like podcast to do, but we'd need to do a bit more research, I think, to be a bit more prepared. Yeah. But like, isn't it interesting? Language, and my wife speaks more than one language. I know that we unfortunately don't.
What's the other one?
She speaks French.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, fluently. Yeah, she speaks French.
So
Charlie, like, probably will beat me up with like French words in a couple of years, which is rough.
You'd be like talking about you behind your back. What are you saying, kids?
I could say very few things like on y va, hurry up. I think roughly. But Liz talks about like when she speaks in French or when she's with people that speak French, she feels like her perception of the world actually changes a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
And culturally, if you speak French, you might act more French, if that's a real thing. And this is probably, again, a segue for a huge topic that we... but I thought that was really interesting because I know Tolkien talked about it, and I'm a big Tolkien fan, and he was into language. And I think often, as a Catholic, we go back to the Latin a lot.
Right.
And for a very long time, again, not going to get too far into it, but that was the universal language that we would translate. You would write your text in university until like the mid 1900s, right? You would write your essays at a university like Oxford or Cambridge or Harvard. You'd write them in Latin. So then if someone in Germany wanted to read them, they translated from the Latin to German as opposed to from the English to German, because that's considered a poorer translation, because English is like a lot of the root, like the foundation of English is Latin. And likewise, so too German and most of the European languages through conquest, I'm guessing. But do you know, like there is, and that is like a more pure and easy way, because I think a lot of the issues with Kant, for instance, is like it's just a bad translation. And that's because it's German to English, and German to English is difficult to do, I think. But we're getting a little bit off topic.
I think the German stuff's notoriously like horrible.
Nietzsche was pretty good though. I mean, maybe he was just a better writer.
I think it's more direct. Most of the German stuff's like flopping around. It's like smoke in the wind, some of those sentences.
It's like some Russian tendencies just to waffle on for freaking ever.
Maybe.
Just
well, it's interesting because I think it seems a very direct language, but their writing on philosophy is just impossible to understand.
Maybe that's the trick. They just write so much. People like, that must be good.
Yeah, well, I really used to think about that when I was at university. I thought that was a super interesting topic, and it never really came back up again. But the way that like a language of a different culture, does the language itself make those people in that culture think down a specific path, or does the culture itself sort of also affect the way that they talk? Like, for example, if the values of this culture are certainly like this, does the language become more fluent, more direct, more harsh? Does it become more flowery, more words, less words? Or does the language itself then go back and affect the culture? It's a bit of a dance.
I definitely is a dance. I know that, I've seen quotes on architecture that goes so into the effect of, we build and shape our buildings, and forever after they mold us. And I think probably language would have a very similar effect. Like, we create language. It's not innate to you. You don't come out speaking, French. You have to learn French, even as a child. But then once we have that language, it does mold us. And we do have maybe a delicate dance between, who's influencing what. But that's, again, we've got a really, really interesting talk in a couple of weeks that we'll have about culture, nationality, ethnicity, and how they all interact. And that'll be a really good place to uncork something like that. Would be really cool. But yeah, going back to, so I got you terribly sidetracked.
No, it does actually come back.
I think that is quite interesting.
Yeah, it's amazingly interesting. I think it comes back to what we were talking about, though. Like, when you're a child, I think you're amazing. Wouldn't say the word genius. I always thought you'd just be more creative. Like, kids are crazy with the way they associate stuff. Got a message from the box office?
It's from Brendos, just saying you guys need to get the light on and keep it
Thanks,
on.
mate. Appreciate it.
No, very good.
We got a little sidetrack there. That was fun, though. Hopefully the light stays on.
Good, yeah.
Brendan said some sweet jokes, which he didn't actually include when the lights went off, and it would have been great. I'm sorry, Brendan. Something to do with fire and the fact we could have lit a fire in the
cave.
Yeah, it was good. Timing's off, so it's now good. Yeah, I think I was picking up what I was saying was I think definitely kids are creative and extremely loose with their thoughts and have really original thoughts when they're young. And
do you mean by loose, you just mean unconfined?
Unstructured, unconfined. It's thinking out of the box. It's all the stuff you want to get when you're older. And they talk about The Office. We need more out of the box thinking. And they go, well, we don't have any.
Yeah, that's actually interesting because this, again, sorry to just jump in on you.
No, that's fine.
Like, remember in math, like a math class where you get the right answer and the teacher's like, well, I want to see you working and I want to see it this way. And it would drive my dad nuts. He's quite good at math and he'd come home and help me with my homework. And he's like, this is how I did it at school, which makes sense. And then I'd come in with that like formula. And the teacher would say, that's not right, even though the answer's right. And you're like, well, hang on a second. What's going on here?
Interesting.
Because isn't that specifically outside the box thinking?
It is. If you come to the same conclusion, you're probably doing a more interesting, creative way of getting to the answer. And it could be useful in another scenario, which you've now cut off because you said, this is the way we do this problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another reason why you should not send your kids to public school.
Right.
It's just my creed against public school education.
Yeah, it's a
terrible.
barrage.
It just destroys everybody.
Well, I think they got those new like Montessori schools where they let the kids like kind of run wild and choose their own subjects. That's a little bit of like the keeping the creativity. They do say that those kids are more successful on a whole, I think, as adults. Yeah. But I guess what I was saying before, you mentioned that we're talking about a bunch of this before the podcast, which we were, about how much like brain power it takes to just be social. Like the amount of actual capacity of your brain is being used just to like run a social situation is
just to live.
And I think, is that part of, what do you think about this? Like, I was thinking this just now as we're talking. You get that trained into you partly at school because it's a complex social environment, and the culture and the country itself is teaching you their ways effectively throughout school.
I have thought about this actually.
Yeah, and then you get the end and you go, well, I've got no original thoughts now, but I'm really good in society.
No, I reckon. See, I have a different take slightly on this, and maybe it's, again, my bias about public school education is it's not hidden at this point. So take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
I would say people, the label typically of like a homeschool kid is like, oh, he's a bit weird, bit off. But is that kid weird, or is he just a more well-adjusted normal person? Because I remember like when I was in school, like some of the stuff that would be normal is just really weird. Like it just objectively, you would never do that as an adult. You're like, that's pretty cringe.
For sure.
Or like the social interaction is not, it's not, I don't know, like if development was linear, there's a couple of years where you're kind of off on the side tangent where you're not really developing. You're just kind of, like playing Call of Duty and talking weird, like mum jokes on the internet, like stuff that just isn't part of the natural progression of maturation. And I would say that on the socializing front, like potentially you can have very sheltered homeschool people.
Yeah.
But and again, I you probably know someone. I know plenty of homeschool kids that are very, very social, and that did lots of social things and have lots of social events that they would go to and be a part of. So
that's what you'd have to do for sure.
Well, I mean, but you probably should be doing that anyway for the formation of your child, going to football, going to ballet, going to piano, like whatever it is that you are interested in. They should have social interaction, certainly. But yeah, I actually am not sure I would agree that sending your kids to school makes them more social. I think they have more social exposure, but that doesn't necessarily make them better at socializing. I mean, I remember it was some kid at school who told me like Santa Claus wasn't real. And like, that's pretty brutal. I mean, really, when you're a kid, like I think I might've been 6.5, 7, maybe like grade 2.
Yeah.
Because grade 1, you kind of fluff through. Like you're pretty much unscathed.
I don't remember what happened in grade 1.
But I think it was
there was naps involved, weren't there? That's still naps.
I think maybe. Yeah. But I definitely think, like, because I was told, and being 7, you don't really have the maturity to be like, I shouldn't tell my 5-year-old brother, but you kind of ruin it for him, because then you come home and you're like, Santa Claus isn't real and blah, blah, blah. And then it takes a lot of the fun out of life, because you get things ruined and you get exposed to like weird sex stuff at, I know, like, not to get into it, but like I never knew anything about pornography or any like these inappropriate things until I was in grade 11, I think, when someone was like, oh yeah, just mentioned it very casually, and I'd never heard about it.
Check this site.
Yeah, I think so. Like I almost verbatim was like, you're not into this, look at this.
Yeah.
And it's one of those dopamine things that you just get, like, it's like a drug, giving a drug to a person who's not, doesn't have the ability to say no to that kind of passion, I think.
Yeah, right.
But the point generally is you're exposed to things that I don't think are to the betterment of you or development, but you're certainly exposed to more social situations that form you into kind of like broadly the mainstream society. Yeah, I think that's the confusion where because like, I'm defending homeschooling here, but like you would say
that's the subtext.
Yeah, but you would say like they're different. I'm like, well, isn't that kind of a good thing? Like some of these public school kids, particularly nowadays, maybe I'm like an old man now, but like nowadays you look at these kids like, well, you should respect people. You should pick up rubbish. You should do things that I would say, maybe everybody says that about the younger generations, but you maybe not doing. Yeah. And I wonder, like, is that a result of more social time with people your own age and fewer hours with your parents? But that is definitely a topic for another day. So
on that point, I think that's kind of what I was saying. I think though, I'm not saying that you'd be more social if you go to school.
Just more mainstream.
I think it's more like trained to fit in with that group in which you are sent to. Like if you get the homeschool kid, he might appear to be less social. That might not be the case objectively. But when the kids start dabbing and that song comes on and the kids homeschool doesn't do anything and they go, oh, why are you not doing this thing we're all doing? He doesn't know what's happening in that situation. He's not been trained. And I think
I feel like that was me a little bit too. Like I remember going out with some of you guys, and I'm like, I don't know what the heck you're doing. You're like, you got to do the dance. I'm like, I don't know the dance. Also, I can't dance, so I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Maybe there's an element of
Maybe.
Yeah, I don't. Just a quick thought. Like I don't think like FOMO or social pressure is innate to humans. I think that's learned behavior. Like when you're a little, like my son does, like, you know, producer Brendos, his kids come over all the time. Like he doesn't look at Theo and go, I want to do what he's doing. Oftentimes it's, I'm doing my own thing. There is probably like that FOMO or, and this might be anecdotal too. I really haven't thought about that much, but is that, in your opinion, innate, or is that a learned behavior? Like you get ostracized at school and all of a sudden you're not cool. You can't sit with us. Mean girls.
I think it's innate to compare. And when you're sent to a school search situation where everyone's young, there's a huge comparison machine going on. Like you said with the Santa Claus thing, one kid's going, I'm better than you, and I know Santa Claus is dead. And you go, well, hang on, I'm a different spectrum, and I know more things than you in other ways. But you think, oh, this is the cool thing. Damn, I need to know the Santa Claus is dead thing. And you kind of learn in different ways and compare, and you do. That's like when you're a kid, there's comparison everywhere. It makes you sad, really. It
does. Well, comparison thief of joy, yeah.
Hey. Let you know.
Great. Yeah. Great minds think alike. Eh?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, look, I think we'll go into first thought, which is my favorite section. I quite like it. I think it's definitely
it's first thought at the end.
First thought at the end, yeah. I just realized that. First thought at the end. But it makes, I think it's an interesting specific question that we can kind of go off into random stuff. So I'll read the question and I'll let you kind of unpack it, and I won't interrupt you, I promise. That's my promise to you. Baby Hitler. Yep. You obviously know, but for those of you who don't know, the question is essentially, if you could go back in time and kill baby Hitler, would you do it, and why or why not?
Previous when we were talking about this, I said, 100%. We're on it.
He did. He did not hesitate. He just said, I'm killing him.
Yeah, but I didn't really put too much thought into it. I don't know if I'm thinking about it now. I'm thinking I kind of believe in a sort of real personal response. You can't kill. It's a baby.
It is
done
a baby.
Anything
you
yet.
Definitely can't kill a baby.
No.
How can you kill a baby?
I mean,
because there's a lot of assumptions that if you could go back in time, that this person is going to become Hitler.
Yeah.
Which you just can't know.
That's right.
I guess because any number of things can change. I won't say that because it's probably get me in trouble. But killing babies, obviously, I think is a pretty reprehensible thing to do, even if they become bad people. I think it goes even a layer deeper. The code of Hammurabi, which you may or may not be familiar with. This is old school stuff.
Go for it.
This is I think it's very interesting. Like Hammurabi was a Babylonian, I think maybe one of the oldest doctrines of like law or code of like civilization. It's very, very old. And in that, it talked a lot about like if you and I were quarreling and we had an issue and you died, I would then take up that quarrel with your son.
Oh no.
Or if you stole from me,
yeah.
It would befall your son to pay your debts.
Right. Yeah.
And it is a very and that's not necessarily a unique worldview, but and I think, bear with me while I work this through, we live in such a Christian world that it is kind of bizarre for us to think that way, because we believe, because our whole culture, our cultural heritage is a son will not pay for the sins of the father, right? That would be unjust. But I would argue that it's probably very natural. That's how you have these generational conflicts, because you might be dead, but my grief is still here. Your son's next in line. I'm taking it on him. And it's a never-ending cycle of you attacked me, you stole my pig, you stole my wife, you did, and they just keep going. And it could be, there's obviously some famous examples probably in the Middle East around the certain cradle of civilization, but we won't go into that. But like there are examples where you go like, why is this still going on? But there's obviously lots of examples all around the world, but that's probably the most famous one. But like, why is this still going on? Because there is a belief, maybe that belief is innate, that my transgression must be vindicated with vengeance. And if the person who assaulted me is no longer here, well, I'm taking out on his next of kin. And that could be broadly countrymen or whatnot. But anyway, I say all that kind of as a way to digress. But no, I would not kill baby Hitler.
Yeah.
If you could assume that everything would play out exactly the same, if you didn't kill Hitler, would that change for you at all, the equation?
The option has to be that you can't do anything else right. Because my mind's is like, maybe affect him a little bit so he doesn't do that terrible stuff. What's the causation that made him do that?
Yeah, just give him a hug. Tell him he's good at art.
Yeah, can you have a toy or something?
This one here. No, I'm joking. It's an original.
Yeah, maybe kill... Who's the person who's around him who's the evilest? Kill that person. Let him, chill. But yeah, I know what you mean. I think the option in this scenario has to be the fact you can either kill him or not kill him. That's the only things you can do. You can affect or not affect, nothing else in between.
Yep.
And the assumption is if you did nothing, it's going to happen exactly the same, like you were never there. It's not like time travel because you were there. The fact that the butterfly flipped his wings now, he didn't even do anything at all because he saw you in his room.
You fool.
Yeah,
you just killed a baby. Tough. Congratulations, you played yourself.
That's a tough one because I guess, would there be another character who would have risen at the time and done something equally terrible? Maybe not. I don't know.
How good's your German history? You know much about the Weimar Republic?
No, not as much as you, for sure.
No, yeah. I'm not saying there is either. I have no idea. Just a brief overview. There was obviously plenty of tension, but when Hitler was imprisoned and he wrote, Mein Kampf, the party did. I don't want to say fall away, but it the sort of trajectory was not take over and win elections. It was sort of Hitler was certainly a very important driver of that movement. So I'm not going to go there, but very, very
different point.
Yeah, very, very important person, pivotal, you would say, to the movement as a whole. Okay, I would say no, mostly because committing an evil act is still an evil act. I heard a really good quote the other day. While a king or a Führer, or a president can move the man, ultimately men have a will to say, I'm not doing that. Ultimately Hitler might have said, we're going to go and start conquering. There are people that could have said, look, we're not doing that. So for me, I don't think that it's on a moral level. I don't think killing him, first of all, you kind of bloody in your own hands because it is a baby. You are killing an innocent person.
You're taking on the act now. You did that.
Yeah, definitely. But I think what I feel like would be a similar thought experiment, but maybe a little bit more interesting because the baby Hitler one, I just don't think I could do it.
Right.
Even if I wanted to do it, you'd get there and you'd be looking at a baby and you're like, I'm not sure I could. Do you know what I mean? Even if you are dead, again, you look at a puppy, you couldn't hurt a puppy. No. You're gonna have to be a bit of a psycho to hurt a puppy. But if someone said I'll give you $1 million to beat the puppy to death with your hands, you'd be like, I don't know, I could do it.
Nah, it seems like a shitty game.
Yeah, even if you could see a tangible reward, saying in your head, rationalizing this would be good, or making an equation that you would say the end justifies the mean, which is a terrible way to live your life, by the way. But if you made that calculation, I think you would still really struggle if you're a genuine person of good will to get to a puppy and be like, whoa, I'm about to beat you up. I don't think you do it.
You could change it and say this puppy in 3 days is going to, let's say it's a big puppy, it's going to maul grandma and she's going to die from septic shock.
Yeah, I'll definitely put it down.
This puppy's got a bipolar problem for puppies.
I'll destroy that.
Okay, well, one more point I was going to say. You could change the experiment to what we're saying, to do anything. You don't want to kill the baby. You could change it to be the baby is on a train track and you have to flip a train to kill you. I mean, it's really on the same vein because in reality...
Very similar.
I think we both said something that was the opposite of what you would do if you turned it into the baby being on the track. Because if you're just pressing a button, all good. It's not as dramatically
It's just not
horrible.
As intimate, is it?
No.
And
there's the
me
baby,
pushing a button.
And there's 400 million
There's a
people.
disconnect. Yeah, well, there's a disconnect between pushing a button and putting a pillow over a baby, listening to it scream and struggle. Okay, how about we take this thought experiment to its, my opinion, logical conclusion? Because Hitler is really a stand-in for evil.
Right.
I think that's a fair read. Go
In the
kill Hitler.
scenario, yeah.
Hitler is the modern day like most evil bad person.
Yeah.
Basically,
Think of the Antichrist. He's probably in there
he's probably in there.
as a nominated.
Like, what if you could go back in time and take someone out to affect history in some way? I mean, I would go back in time and want to stop the second greatest JC from being taken out, Julius Caesar, and just seeing what would happen.
Yeah, right.
That would be my, like, I think that would be way, and maybe because I've heard a few of these, like, what would you do, baby Hitler thing before, but I had never heard, like, what would you do? Would you go back to save Caesar, or would you want to be in the Senate and say, we got to get out of here?
That's
Brutus.
interesting. Well, people are going to kill him.
Yeah, two Brutus.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
do we
no
kill
good.
them? They're already
Well, you don't have to kill them. You just have to say, like, they're going to try and kill you and bring a bunch of the boys.
I get some protection.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that'd be fascinating.
And I think most people would, maybe not that's a very specific example because I know
So
you love Julius, but
specific, I do,
people
yeah.
that, they might say, hey, like Martin Luther King, don't go on that balcony today. There's like
Cool.
examples. you could
JFK,
do.
maybe
Yeah, don't drive
just
down
drive in a regular
topless.
limo.
Yeah,
Yeah. Remember
that's
we
right.
told you? Regular limo.
You could, I think most people would do that.
Yeah, that's definitely a
100%.
lot more palatable. Because again,
Or
you're
do
not
we
really
kill Lee
affected.
Harvey Oswald or whatever?
Well, that's the thing. Like, that's the thing, isn't it? That's the crux of it. Because I think you could still say, like, Julius Caesar represents the death of the Roman Republic,
Right.
and
The downfall at the start.
the end.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. The conclusion of the Republic, because he's the first emperor, really,
Yeah.
because he had the army.
Caesar. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would, as a lover of the Roman Republic, I would be like, oh, this is quite bad. But I also think, like, Caesar was a pretty unbelievable person, and you're like, maybe would things have been better if were he to live? The argument, I guess, this is like Roman history, but Octavian was pretty great.
Ooh, I can't remember. Now got to go back in there.
Yeah, he's one of,
They're
like,
all really horrible,
one of the best.
except for like a handful.
Yeah, there was definitely probably a little bit more than a handful, but yeah, I don't
Yeah.
mean. Most of they became over time worse and worse and worse. Like after the 5 good emperors, it's all downhill.
There's like a whole bunch of
downhill.
Tituses and
Yeah, Neros and those kind of
Yeah.
guys. But like early on, very, very efficient, cultured, well-mannered guys. And Octavian, I think, would, if we were, rating them on a tier list, would be top tier.
Well, we could have been technologically and
I love
socioculturally
that
more
argument,
advanced,
So
but we
what if
wouldn't be speaking English, and we
That's
wouldn't be
true.
doing this.
But is Latin better?
You got a bias there. I mean, I like what we're doing right now. It's pretty good.
That's true. I do like it. Okay, well, look. So, sorry. Are you killing baby Hitler?
No, I don't think so.
You don't think so?
But I'm gonna think about this and give you an answer to the next one.
Yeah,
To be
okay,
honest, 'cause,
okay, good,
I don't know
cool,
about
cool.
that.
That's the purpose of first thought. Just for those that don't remember, is to basically put a philosophical dilemma to one another without having a great deal of pre-thought into it. So this week I got to ask Cameron. So unlucky Cameron had to sit here and quickly figure out what to do with baby
I'll
Hitler
bring a new one next time.
and put his morals to the test. But yeah, next time it'll be interesting to see how I go under pressure because I had a bit more time to think about it. But ultimately, I think for me at least, the way I see the world morally, I don't think I could kill a baby.
Yeah, how much are you individually against murder?
I
It's hard.
I can't do it because, like I said, there are many factors that led to World War II that not all of them
Super
were
complex.
out of Hitler's
Yeah.
fault. And just because he at the top was saying we should Lebensraum and we should look for living space and more German territory and unite the old imperial German state. Like, there are a lot of other people that are doing things.
Yeah, I mean,
you know?
arguably you could come and just stop the Franz Ferdinand thing, and that wouldn't have started the first.
That would
one,
be
which didn't
better
start the
because I
second
feel
one.
like that's
Yeah.
the death of the old world. That would be way better.
Yeah.
Just stop that. But again, we're getting way off topic. I could not kill a baby, even
No,
if they
probably not.
became a bad person.
But there's some fundamental underlying reasons of why you're doing that, and you kind of
Some of
harped
them,
on it.
yeah,
Where you said that the Christian
are false.
ethos that runs through the background of like certain cultures, which let's just say it makes it really difficult to understand the fundamental basis and foundations of other
Yeah,
people's thoughts in general, because there's not
course.
running, I guess, the same,
Yeah,
very
of
subtle,
course.
not good or bad, just different, and there's a different basis of where it's coming from, and that's interesting, and there's definitely a thing behind it. And
Yeah,
it's in my head a bit, whereas because it's like I don't think that specific act is any good.
Oh, of course.
Whereas
Yeah.
other people might
the
say, well, in
cultural
certain
undertone is
circumstances, yeah.
great, even if you aren't yet a Catholic. Like it's still a very difficult thing to fight against the cultural weight of Christianity's impact on your life because you're inundated with it. Like the laws of our country have their foundation to some degree, fairly significant degree, rooted in like Christian doctrine. And that's obviously evolved over time, but like the foundation of which is, I want to say biblical because it's a bit Protestant, but like that's a very Christian ethics is what we would consider Australia to be. So yeah, I would be remiss to think killing baby Hitler would do much. Although it is interesting if you do put the parameter in, like nothing will change if you don't kill him and 100 and whatever million people will die.
Or it's just an app that you press yes and you can do it right now. It's like people
would it change you? Would it change at all if I said, if you kill baby Hitler, World War II doesn't happen? That's it.
But am I born? And everything else
That's
is all
what I mean.
good?
Yeah. Are you born? Is there
not,
another?
No.
Like, is the Cold War way worse? Because there's so many, like the what ifs. Because that's what I always feel like is a funny holder point. Like, just because you defer World War II doesn't mean that another more horrific tragedy doesn't occur.
Because we didn't have that specific lesson.
Because like if World War II happened in the 70s, like or 50s, 60s,
we'd all be probably dead.
Well, like if they had nuclear bombs, you're like, well, they probably would have used them.
Probably.
Because they did. I mean, America did.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there was, once we had that weapon, it needed to be used to be understood like we can't be using this.
Yeah.
So if it happened 10 years later, the outcome might have been much worse. So that's always the danger. And I think that actually speaks to an underlying assumption that we all have, is that whatever action we take, the future will be better.
Right.
So like if I asked you like, hey, if you do this, your life will change. The assumption is it will change for the better. Do you know what I mean? Like, and if you're a rich person, like, I don't know, this could be a bad analogy, but just bear with me. Like Tom Cruise, like, hey mate, if you do this, this, and this, your life will be better. He would do it, call it Scientology, but he would do it, right?
Yeah.
And like, dude, you're Tom Cruise, your life's already great. But he's like, I want to be better. And the assumption is always more, and better. Like the assumption with killing baby Hitler is we avert a crisis and everything's great.
Yeah. And
but that's not necessarily true.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting human kind of element to that. So
I think we've got heaps more points here that we're going to talk about and other things. I think this is actually like harped on a pretty interesting point.
It's quite interesting. Well, look, thanks very much. This has been Two Blokes in a Cave. A couple of blokes hoping to get out of the cave.
Yeah.
Until
sometimes
next
lights
time.
on, sometimes lights on.
We're going to get the lights fixed, I promise. All right. See you later, guys. God bless.
Bye.